Hey everybody, it's Devin Francis, also known as Dr. Blackguard.
And I have things to say. I have things to say.
We got a solid core of an album here today with what episodes, Victoria?
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Auto response
Mm-hmm.
and something about relatability. I don't have the other episode title in front of me.
I'm glad that you're like I'm so ready for these
I'm
episodes. I have
so
all these
ready,
things to
except
say.
for
I
what
don't
the
know the names
episodes
of
are
either of
called.
them. Unrelatable.
Unrelatable. Yeah. I can tell you everything else about them.
So,
I did research for the second episode, darn it.
all right.
Mid-episode, I paused it and it was like, okay, I listened to Unrelatable like right before going to bed, so it was probably like 1:30 in the morning or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't get my phone charger to work, so I was just like laying on my stomach trying to like plug it into different outlets in the wall for the first half of the episode, in the dark, just very, very unsettled. And then by the time I finished the episode, I was just kind of staring at the ceiling in the dark, just being like,
Okay,
just
so
shook to my core. And then mid episode, when I heard the line like about the posters, I turned off my phone real quick and grabbed my laptop and then booted up album 4 and then searched through Go Ye Therefore. And
Victoria, we're not talking about that episode yet. Can you wait?
Yes. No. Yes.
Okay. First, episode 906, Auto Response, written by Phil Lawler. What happens in this episode, Victoria?
Okay, well, at the beginning of this episode, it starts off with Pull House,
Mm-hmm.
and he's in his car.
Yeah.
And he gets a police alert, like radio call, that says that a car turned up.
No.
Or no, that like there was a report of a stolen car or a missing car.
At what address?
And Connie's address,
which is
you probably wrote it down specifically word for word.
What's...
But I'm not you, Mr. National Treasure, so I can't remember what it is.
So you didn't pay attention to the fact that her house number
it's like something Huckleberry Lane or something like that.
Is 1987, which is the year that the show began.
Why would I?
Well, because it was an obvious Easter egg.
I don't remember what year the show began. That's a you thing. That's what you're here for.
I'm glad I can be so purposeful for you.
And so Connie says that her car went missing, and we find out Jules plays the clarinet, which now she plays... Actually, that's the only instrument we know for sure she plays.
That's true.
She doesn't play the guitar. That's Buck. So that kind of surprised me. I'm assuming it's for band.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't really see her playing the clarinet.
Jules, yeah, really doesn't strike me as a clarinetist.
I never would have expected the clarinet. I would have expected literally any instrument but the clarinet, honestly. Like, I would think, like,
the only justification I can think
like
is that she really doesn't care about concert band, and clarinet is one that I feel like gets picked a lot by people who are like, I'll just, do whatever. Granted, I mean, it's not the easiest instrument because anytime you're working with a reed, obviously, you're making things a lot more difficult for yourself.
Yeah. And I don't know, I would have expected, like, if we were going for a reed instrument for her, I would have expected, like, the saxophone or something like that.
Yeah. And I would have thought that, because on the one hand, I'm like, oh, I could see Jules at the beginning. She'd be like, I don't care about concert band and above all that or whatever. But also because she's so, like, music-focused, career orientation-wise, I could see her being like, actually, I do want to, like, learn an instrument. Granted, the thing about concert band is that apart from being in percussion, all of the other instruments you typically find cannot also be sung with by the same person because they all require the use of your mouth.
Just imagining, like, all these indie bands with just, like, guitar accompaniment, and then Jules just has, like, clarinet accompaniment that she's singing to that she recorded separately.
Just
but like no other
be like
instruments.
Lizzo in the middle of a concert when she reaches into her dress and pulls out a flute and then just busts out a flute solo.
Does she actually do that? Oh, I did not know that. I don't really know anything about Lizzo. So Connie was supposed to pick up all these reeds for Jules for school, and then she notices that like the reeds that were supposed to be in the car are not in the garage because the car's not in the garage. And so
kind of burying the lead there.
And so then Connie, who is very sick and very dosed up on cold medication, is like, oh, I don't know where it is. And Jules is obviously wanting to say something. And I'm like, okay, Jules probably took the car or something like that.
You know, I just realized that the reason that Whit sent Connie home from Whit's End, he's like, Connie, you're very clearly extremely high right now. And speaking as someone who is very recently, very publicly high out of his mind and unable to go anywhere or do anything coherently, I need to take you home.
So Connie was at Whit's End, and then she was sent home because she was sick. So her car was still at Whit's End because Whit didn't want her driving home, and Eugene saw her at Whit's End also. And Jules was like going by, and she noticed the car was there. So like the good roomie she is, she stole Connie's car because I love Jillian. I said Jules. Jillian stole Connie's car because they kept on teasing Jillian for the first like 10 minutes of this episode.
That's just what being a roommate is about, Victoria.
They mentioned Jillian's name, and then they're like, oh, Jillian's not here. She can't come to the phone right now.
Like,
and I was just like, no. And then Jillian finally
This is what happened
in
California Dreams.
We also met several more of the employees at J&J's. So there's
I mean, I don't think they're dedicated employees there specifically, but they are delivery people whose work includes there. I don't think Jason has that many employees.
Mm-hmm. So Jillian took the car to Triple J's, and then she had to go do a delivery thing for work there. Mm-hmm. So then she went to
a friend's house.
Where she went. She went to like a friend's house after she did the delivery stuff, and she stayed there overnight. And then Jules saw the car there, and then she took it for like a joyride, and then it broke down in the woods.
A very confusing kind of timeline, because she saw it while she was on the bus to school, just asked the driver to stop and let her off.
Which, like, wow, bus drivers never do that whenever I ask.
And so she gets off, she goes for the joyride, the car breaks down, and then she happens to see the bus still going by, or a different bus going by. So it's still during the frame of buses picking people up for school.
She couldn't call Buck because he's fixed the car before when it's broken down. And then the next day at school, so like slowly Pullhouse is visiting different people and like piecing this all together.
It reminded me up to this point, and I wasn't expecting the end of the back third of this episode. But up
you
to
can
this
say
point,
that about both of these episodes. Both of the last section, actually, for the last 3 episodes, the last bit of the last 3 episodes has just gotten me.
Yes, well, a little less of the previous episode that was kind of the gotcha moment. But apart from that, it reminded me of Into Temptation with Jimmy in the Room of Consequence, the first Room of Consequence adventure, where they're trying to find the Zapazoids game, and it's like becoming each person being like, oh, but then it was this person, they took it and they put it here, and it's like, oh, but then this person,
I did it.
Yeah, and every person happened to run into it and place it in a different place, and it's just like this ongoing chain passing between
like
everyone's
that.
hands.
I definitely like this episode a lot more than Into Temptation, though. And so, also continuing the writer thing that we talked about the other day, because I listened to these the 2 consecutive days after we recorded. I like focused deeply on who the writer was at the end of the episode and tried to like think about all of it. So the first time I was just like, Phil wrote that, and the second time I was like, Marshall, and so the next day at school, Buck has a spare period, So Jules asks Buck to go and get the car back and take his bike so he can get her clarinet reads.
She's
And
like,
she
don't worry,
says,
no one will miss you.
yeah, she says no one will miss you. And then she says it like really offhanded, just like in a casual, like friendly, like chill way. That's just like not intended to mean anything.
I was like, Buck is
waits,
absolutely
like,
me
just
in this
a beat
situation
too
where it's like,
long
oh, it's gonna be
before
fine, no one will miss
responding.
you. And then like me immediately takes this to heart and applies it to every aspect of my life.
Yeah, Buck just like pauses and then he's just like really quiet when he answers. He's like, "Oh yeah, you're right." And the music's like, doo-doo. And I was like, "No." And also, can I say the last half of this episode, I was eating lunch and I was just sobbing into my lunch, like upstairs in the kitchen, while
Right in front of my
Amanda was
salad.
just like 5 steps away from me in the next room, just couldn't see me from where I was sitting, and I was just having a full crisis at the dinner table. Um, and so basically, Buck sees the car, and then the initial story we get from him is he sees the car, and then he puts his bike in it, and then he starts taking it back to Odyssey. And so while Polehouse is going around and collecting all these stories from people, one of the first people he talks to is Eugene, and Polehouse is like, I bet I know where it is. Buck probably stole it because I can't find Jillian and I can't find Buck. And I was like, you stay away from Jillian and you stay away from Buck. And then Eugene like throws hands immediately with Polehouse because he's like, we've done this song and dance before. It is not my precious boy. It is not my son. And then
Eugene was really, like, literally and explicitly this close to throwing hands with the cop over protecting Buck, and I was so excited.
So good. I was thriving, honestly. I was so proud of Eugene. And unfortunately Katrina isn't in the episode, otherwise she wouldn't have hesitated, honestly. That's the difference between Eugene and Katrina.
Eugene and Katrina to each other are both like, baby, take my flower. It's like, you go, baby, I got your flower.
They both hand their flowers to Buck,
each other.
and he's like, what do I do with these? And by the time he looks back up, they're just like beating up Polehouse. And so everywhere Polehouse goes, he basically blames Buck, and then every person he talks to is like, it's not Buck. And then they end up finding the car, and Buck is inside of it. So
every single time Polehouse shows up, I'm like, oh yeah, I've missed Polehouse. And he's like, I think Buck did it. And I'm like, really? Are we still doing this? I always forget.
I know, I was so tired of it too at the beginning of this episode. I was like, I can't wait for him to see that it wasn't Buck and just like apologize, because we've already gone through this like 3 times, and I thought he was past this with Buck. And then when they're just like, oh, Polehouse, we've got the perp, and then they said like, he's just in here or something, and I was like, not Buck, not Buck, not Buck, and he was like, hello, and you just hear, hello, Officer Polehouse, in this Buck voice, and I was like, no! And, so then, Connie finds out that Buck is in the prison and everyone else is there, and she was just like, well, I know Buck doesn't have any, like, malicious intent. He wouldn't take my car. I believe Jules when she says that he was just returning it to me. And so I'm gonna drop all the charges. And then...
as this episode was going on, I kept looking at how much time was left and was like...
I wasn't doing that. I was just shaking,
I was doing it because you wanted to record it at a specific time, and so I was like trying to keep track of like how close I was to meeting that time. And the farther into the episode, the more confused I got about the pacing and the amount of time that was left. And then Buck's like, actually, I was trying to steal the car. And I was like...
Yeah, because Polehouse goes into the cell, and then he's just like, well, Buck, they've dropped all the charges. And Buck's like, all right, I can go. And Polehouse is like, no, you can't, because you did try to steal the car. And I was like, no, he didn't. And Buck's like, yeah, I did. I'm like, Buck, no.
Because when he first gets him, and Buck's like, yeah, it was me, throw me in jail, whatever. And it was like, very obviously the like, yeah, whatever, you're not going to believe me anyways, and I'm covering for someone else kind of thing. And so then the second time it was like, actually, I was. And I was like, no!
I guess, because at first there was this like minute or so where I was like, this doesn't make any sense for Buck's character, and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking like, well, if Buck is having like a bad day or something like that, and he's just having like a really low self-esteem day, and feels really lonely or something like that, and then he gets that comment from Jules, if he's already like in a bad mood and stuff, and I think it makes sense for him to take the car and try to leave. But I did have to have this moment of just like thinking it through for his character,
Once
because
he
I feel like
explained it,
if you look at
I
it very surface level, then it doesn't really make sense.
once they said it,
a bit
I
of a
super
thinker.
got it because
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely been where Buck is before. That's been my entire last week, literally, of everything I've been going through. Not to get like insanely personal, but like my last week has entirely been Buck in this episode, and so I felt extremely called out by the lesson of it. And it has been quite a while since I've had an episode be so perfectly timed with like exactly what's in my head and be like, stop it. I was like,
Oh, I
I done got,
appreciate
I done
you.
got. I got. It's been so long since I got like no scoped like that. So that was wild when it came up, and I was like,
There, you know that bit in Cage 2 where Roxas is leaving the organization and he's like, no one would miss me. And then Axel's like, I would. I just think about that line like all the time whenever I'm like sad or anything like that. And I'm like, no one cares about me or something. And then I think about like you and Gabe and Riley and like all my other friends. I'm thinking like they probably have moments like that too, where it's just like no one would miss me. And then I think like if anything, I have this moment like at least like once every 2 days minimum, where I'm just like, if anything happened to any of you guys, I would be absolutely devastated and I would never get over it. Never forget that. Because you guys are very important to me. And just like, yeah, it was really heartwarming seeing everyone like sticking up for Buck
I love
in this
when Polehouse is
episode.
convincing Buck of it. He's like, look, Eugene was ready to physically assault me earlier today, so
Yeah. Fullhouse is like, I almost had to arrest Eugene just so he would leave me alone. And Buck's like, really? And I was like, oh my gosh. This episode almost made me cry. It was really nice.
And
And,
then
what else? Oh yeah, we found out that, because Pullhouse had more backstory stuff in the episode with Ed Washington, didn't he?
yeah, in that it was either like between that and the long game, whatever it's called, the long end. Um, like he mentioned that he was from the same town originally where Buck's family was from.
Mm-hmm.
That was what? There was the two that come up in the episodes.
Pullhouse's backstory is like so slow burn, and I'm honestly
Harlanville.
really here for it.
Harlanville is where Buck and Polehouse were both born.
And didn't we know something
As of the
else
long
about
end.
him from like the Ed Washington episode?
I think so. I think he like referred to something about his past, and I don't
Like
remember
a
specifically.
toy or something like that he liked, but I don't think we knew he was adopted before today.
No,
like,
we didn't.
before
No,
this
that was definitely new.
Yeah.
I said in my notes, like, it blows the lid wide open on his character analysis, and all I could think of was like Javert in the confrontation when he was like, "I am from the gutter too."
It was so good, and also
Because it's
there's
very
this
Jean
whole
Valjean,
bit.
where Buck's like, "I'm good now," and he's like, "You can never change. I will never stop hunting you."
There's this whole running joke in the episode where they're just like, we can just leave our keys in the car because it's Odyssey, and I was like, no,
stressful experience. And at the end, he's like, "You know what? Maybe I will leave my keys in my car." I was like, "This is the wrong lesson to take from this episode."
Boy, and then he was just like, my car is in the garage, which is locked. I was like, thank you.
Still
not great.
Still not great, but I was like just getting increasingly frustrated throughout the course of the episode as it became a running joke. I was like, "Stop leaving y'all's keys in your cars."
I know several people who just like straight up leave their houses unlocked because they're just like, I trust my neighbors, or I live in a small town, or anything like that. Like, the second
I'll do
I'm
it if I'm
home
home
alone in
and
a
it's
house,
daytime.
even if everyone else in the house just like keeps the house unlocked regularly. The second I am home alone in a house, I just run to all the doors and I lock them because
Yeah.
I don't trust like that.
And like, okay, I kind of on topic. The second to last episode of Red Web that came out was about this murder mystery, unsolved murder that happened in 1935, and it was in a hotel room. And as Trevor's recounting the series of events that the hotel staff talked about each time they visited this room leading up to the death, it was extremely confusing to think about the logistics of it because hotel rooms back then only locked from the outside. So
Okay.
it didn't really have to do with like the nature of the murder or anything. It just made it very confusing because
So like
it would
when
be
you're
like
inside the hotel room, it's
you
not locked.
when you anytime you're inside the hotel room, it can't be locked unless someone locks you inside and you would not be able to get out. So by design, when you are in the room is unlocked, including while you are asleep at night. The only time it would be locked is if you were leaving for the day and you would lock it behind you. So you
I
would
don't
sleep
like
with the door
that.
unlocked. I do not like that. It made
I
the
don't like that
mystery
at all.
very confusing because it's like, well, the cleaning staff went to clean the room and the door was locked and they opened it and the guy was inside on his bed. And it's, which normally would be a normal sentence, but in this case is like, then that means a second party must have locked him inside the room, or he locked it and then like climbed on the windows outside to get through the window inside. Like,
That'd be me, so I can
it's
just
suddenly
be in a locked room.
it's, well, you also wouldn't be able to get out without climbing through the windows or breaking the door down.
So you'd be safe.
My point is, it added a lot of unnecessary complexity to this mystery just because of like, it's really weird to wrap your mind around the idea that you cannot lock the door from the inside.
But that like sucks so much. Like if you're changing or something like that, the door's just gonna be unlocked.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah. It's bad.
That
It's
is
bad
bad.
design. So it made me think of that. Yeah, lock your car keys in
Lock
your
your
house.
houses, lock your cars, take your keys out of the car.
That line in Iron Man 2 where he's like, we don't leave our doors unlocked at night. This isn't
I
Canada.
was trying to remember what that line was from. I want to say Date Night for some reason, even though we just watched Date Night and it clearly was not.
No,
from that
it was from the very beginning of Iron Man 2 when he's in court with Hammer Tech.
Hammerman.
Yeah, Connie's house number is 1987 Boardlam Street, it sounded like they said. It's hard because both of those addresses at first were given over the radio, so it's kind of muffled. And then Pull House does say the second one back, the street, the lane that Buck was taking out of town was Bartholdi Lane, which is near the Riley Clements Farms. But hey, we have, even though the street was kind of hard to make out, we know Connie's address, which is also Jules and Jillian's and formerly Penny's and formerly June's house address. So that's cool. So this episode did a lot in terms of like giving us red herrings because in like the first 3 lines that Connie gives to Pull House, she was like, yeah, sorry, I don't remember super well because like my memory is all hazy because of the cold medicine I took. And it was like, well, immediately red flag. This is like a very obvious whodunit flag of like, oh, Connie is the one who like put the car somewhere and she forgot because of the cold medicine.
Yeah, it like immediately set up Connie like first minute as being an unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
And also the little Pull House radio thing was before the intro for the episode that Chris said, which I think it's been a while since we've had just a little bit of
a cold open, probably.
Just a little bit of a cold open. So that was really nice. That felt like kind of classic Odyssey. I liked that. I was thinking it was either going to be Connie and she just forgot doing it, or Jules was so suspicious during like that flashback scene. I thought it was Jules that had it and she like crashed it or something like that, and that's why she wasn't telling Connie where it was. I thought like those two were
I
my
wasn't
main
because I was just so
suspects.
sure. I was like, well,
Literally,
obviously Connie
the
did it.
last person I suspected was Buck.
I was like, obviously it's Connie. It's just like that guy on Reddit who thought he was being broken into and gaslit by his landlord, and then it just turned out he had carbon monoxide poisoning and he was leaving notes for himself and forgetting it.
That is terrifying. What?
Classic. That's like the most classic story of like people on the internet solving a mystery that someone put that was like themselves, and it was like a health thing that they saved them from.
That's terrifying.
It was like he was like, I think my landlord's breaking in and leaving these sticky notes everywhere, because there's sticky notes every like morning or when I come home from work, and they'll be like around my apartment, and they're written in someone else's handwriting, and I can't tell what they're saying, and so I don't know what's going on. Is my landlord breaking in? And then people were doing like all these things guessing, and the one person was like, hey, this sounds familiar, get a carbon monoxide detector. And
that
it was
sounds
a
like very memento-y.
very low level of carbon monoxide, which can cause you to like become delirious and have memory loss. So like not enough to kill you, but enough that he would like leave these notes around in delirium and write not in his own handwriting, of just like scribbly nonsense, and then forget about it repeatedly.
Forget about
Being slowly poisoned. Anyways, yeah. So Paul House immediately is like, it's Buck. And I was like, are we still really playing this game? And also, it's been so long since we've heard a lot from him, and I've been playing so many different Assassin's Creed games now that I feel like his voice, that Phil Proctor's voice, is equally cemented in my mind as Don Polehouse and Warren Vidic. So that was weird, because he was talking and I could just hear him saying like, Mr. Miles. And I'm like, he's equally both roles in my mind now, because it's the same voice that he uses, and that's weird. And then after
I missed Full House. I always really like when he's in an episode.
After just a couple visits, every time they talked to Connie was like, yeah, because like this cold medicine. She was like, I was so out of it. I don't know what's going on. And she just kept really...
I was crazy back then.
She kept hammering the cold medicine. And I was like, okay, maybe this is a red herring, because they're going pretty hard. It doesn't feel like subtle foreshadowing anymore. And I loved at Wit's End, where she's just basically like smashing dishes on the ground. It's like, Connie, I'm going to take you home. And she's like, okay, I'll drive. He was like, no, you're not going to drive. And she's just like a cat just sweeping glass milkshake glasses onto the floor. I just assumed you were going to interject there or something.
I have nothing to say at the moment. I've already said a lot of the stuff I have to say.
Everyone is talking about leaving their keys in the car. Whit is the second person to bring it up, and he was like, what's happening in Odyssey? It would be a shame if we needed to start worrying about being able to leave our keys in our cars. Like, imagine a world where we weren't able to do that. And I was like, hello? What?
Don't do that. This shouldn't be something we have to tell people.
Yeah. I think looks like most of the notes I have through the rest of the episode have been covered. So they finally track it down to Buck, and it's like, as soon as they're like, oh, we found the person, he's in custody, it's like, well, obviously it's Buck. And then Buck is like, yeah, go on, lock me up. Isn't this what you wanted? And it's like, well, clearly he didn't do it, Polehouse, obviously.
I'm just thinking about like Blackguard and like Glossman and Charles and all these characters who are like really negative on all the Odyssey citizens as a whole, and it's just like they're just idiot country bumpkins, and then I'm just like, no, they're not. And then they don't lock their car, they like don't lock their home doors, and they leave their keys in their car, and I'm like, ignore that. Don't look at that. Don't look at example A
or B or C or D or E in this episode. So then Jules is immediately like, no, I did this, actually. I do this. And then she's like, I asked Buck to go get the car and then drive it back. And then we're like, everything's all good. Why is there still some time left in the episode? And then Detective Polehouse is like, well, Buck, looks like you were innocent. Everyone cares about you. Except
for me, who cares about you a lot, actually. Are you doing okay? I know it's hard when you're adopted. I was like, oh, Polehouse,
except you did steal the car. And Buck's like, so what if I did? And I was like, scandalized, betrayed.
Scandal, season 2, episode 6. Can't believe this.
Yeah, and then he explains it, and I was like, aw, dang, I done gone got. And then Polehouse just gives him the speech and was like, everyone cares about you. You don't need to test their affection. You just need to trust in it. And like, just do that. And go off. You're good. I didn't see nothing. And then we find out he calls his mom, and we find out he was adopted. And it was like the character analysis, the parallels.
I feel like this episode
The
also would have been like
self-projection.
a good one to talk about. Just like briefly mention the fact that Eugene was also adopted. Like they don't really need to because they've already gone over it before, but I felt like it wouldn't have been unwelcome.
When are we gonna get the Pull House backstory now, where it shows him being like a petty criminal, getting into trouble as a youth?
I definitely could see that, like an episode where
That's why he projects onto Buck, because
where he almost went to juvie or something like that, and then he was befriended like by a friendly detective or something like that, who he had to like do an internship for, or he would have been sent to juvie
or a
something
crooked
like
cop, and he had to turn him in. He's like, now I take your job. I cast like, Uno reverse on you.
I just love the joke. It's just like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, in your chair.
Yeah, that's exactly it. He got interned with a cop, and then he killed the cop, and he stole his identity, and now he's Don Full House detective.
And everyone's just like, Pull House, where did that name come from? He's like, oh, good question. I stole it. Also, there's like, that line I
definitely
about
didn't make it up by looking at the things around me, which was a pole and a house.
We also have that line in Green Ring about Pull House's ex-wife.
Yeah.
So...
the most savage line in the history of the show, you mean?
I barely remember what it is. Like,
basically, he said that his wife died from a heart attack, and she was like, I bet she was just faking it.
Oh... rough.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if someone said that to like Jack about Emmy or something like that?
But here's the thing, it was a very Kismesis moment because they were flirting like through it though. So
yeah. Yeah, that's
anyways,
true.
Yeah, that's the episode.
I was surprised that Phil wrote it. I thought Kathy would have written that one. But it was a really good episode. Just because Kathy usually handles, like, the
Buck and Jewel stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was really good. I really liked it.
It was really good. It, multiple times, faked me out with red herrings, which is good. I love it when an episode can pull the wool over my eyes, not just once, but twice, especially in an episode that isn't, like, this is, like, a plot, mystery, intrigue kind of thing, like, in, like, a Rydell Revelations kind of way. This is more of a slice of life kind of mystery.
See, that was and me especially with for this a episode and the next episode. Both of it, like the auto response or whatever this episode is called. I remember saying like I figured this one would be super slice of life, not really mean anything, it'd be like about Beezy or something like that. And I just like wouldn't
You kept saying Beezy. I knew it was. I saw when the album description went up that Connie got her car stolen, so I knew that much going into it, but that was it.
Yeah, and I didn't expect it to be this good. I didn't think I'd care this much. It was a great episode. I loved it. I'm gonna give it 5 stars. It was so good for every single character, and it had Jillian.
Had Jillian and Jules and Buck and Eugene and Connie. I mean, what more can you ask?
It had like protective Papa Eugene. It was very good. I wish Katrina was in it, but they probably didn't have enough like time to fit a bunch of people in it. Yeah,
there's a lot of. It's already a big cast in this episode. Yeah, I think I will have to give it 5 out of 5.
Katrina,
I really have.
Buck bonding.
It was really good on character. The plot faked me out multiple times, and the theme like spoke directly to me in this time and moment, to my soul. So that literally it nailed all 3 prongs of like episode review for me. So I have to give it a 5 out of 5.
Yeah, This episode was so good. This is definitely my favorite episode in the album so far. I can't remember what the first episode in the album was. Oh yeah, Jumping Off, Jumping In.
Yeah.
This album has been so good so far, and also there's Christmas bells.
The first 98% of Christmas bells. Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else?
Do you want to talk about the...
All right.
Not really. Do you want to talk about the next one? I'm very ready to talk about the next one.
I would love to talk about the next one, so let's talk about Unrelatable now. So now, episode 907, Unrelatable, written by Marshall Younger. What happens in this? I mean, like you said, Victoria, when we have a candid conversations with Connie episode, nothing abnormal ever happens, and it's always
Yes.
extremely fine and okay and undramatic.
See, the thing that gets me is at the beginning, Connie was doing fine. So, like, the rule is if Connie's doing fine
quiet.
during a candid
Too
conversation,
quiet.
like going into it, she's not going to be fine by the time she comes out of it, because Connie's never fine.
Although,
in
to
one
be
of these.
fair, that wasn't candid conversations anymore. That was bizarre behaviors with Wooten. So now he is accepted the radio curse.
Okay.
Connie has done this
felt like
crossover episode with Wooten, and she's passed the black spot onto him.
this episode touched on so many things we've talked about with Connie for such a long time, and like the core original purpose of Connie's character, which if you go back to album 3, when Connie first entered the show,
Album 1.
she entered the show because they wanted a relatable character. And we've talked about Connie's like kind of stagnant development and how it like sometimes she goes forward, but lots of the time she goes back to like kind of this general stasis of like all these different things going on in her life, and it's so she can like
Just like real people.
stay relatable and stuff like that. And this episode, I felt like they were just like staring at us specifically, like the people who talk about these things with Connie's character, and being like, yes, we know, we're aware that this is how Connie is and stuff like that, and that she's, through her relatability in certain aspects, she's also kind of unrelatable in like others. I don't know. I know it was just kind of also talking about like how it can be
You can't be all things to all
hard
people.
to relate to certain Christians and stuff like that based on like their morality, and personal choices because of their faith and stuff. But I also felt like they were just talking about like Connie's character and her development a little bit too. Did you get that vibe?
I did not think about that whatsoever.
Do you think me thinking about that makes sense though?
I think it makes sense for you to think about that. I didn't think about the fact that, well, because when you said why she was originally created, I thought you were going to refer to the fact that she was created to be like an antagonistic force, like a soft antagonist.
I mean, that's true too. I didn't really think
That's
about
what
that.
I thought you were leading to. But yeah, she was created to be, you know, a proxy for the listener in terms of like, you know, I'm a kid, a little older, so you'll look up to me, and then you can relate
and
to
now
me
Connie
as I'm
isn't really
going through
a
this journey.
proxy anymore, which makes her unrelatable. And I just thought it was like really interesting.
Yes, that is an interesting way to think about it, and I'm sure if I had thought about it before, I would like have more musings. Because we've talked about before how we've been like, oh, Connie feels so stagnant sometimes, because she brings it up a lot,
Exactly.
obviously, compared to other characters like Eugene, who are constantly getting all these different things going on in their life. But I think that makes her more relatable, more so than Eugene, who's constantly having plot developments of like, well, I'm dating and I'm married, and then my father-in-law was assassinated, and then I had to run around the world to escape hit squads from like big corporations for a couple years, and then I came back and we adopted the teenage criminal who held my wife hostage in a trailer. And
Eugene's life is so crazy.
exactly, like it's like
way.
Eugene gets lots of plot development, but Connie being like, yeah, I'm a late 20-something who's still just trying to figure out whether what they're doing with their life right now is what they want to keep on doing, and mostly just trying to make sure that I can keep paying my rent while I do some more schooling and figure out what comes next. Because, I mean, I don't know, is a lot more relatable than whatever Eugene is doing at any given moment.
Yeah, I mean, like, Connie is definitely relatable for, like, a chunk of the audience, but not as much of the audience as she originally
Well, yes, because most of the
been and
audience
stuff
is
like
not,
that.
like, 29.
Yeah. I mean, you're not 29 either.
Well, no, I'm saying my life is more like Connie's than the target demographic
I mean,
of the show.
to be fair, everyone's life is a lot more like Connie's than Eugene, I hope. So, in, just bear in mind while I talk about the description of this episode, I listened to this alone in a basement, dark, in the dark, very
Tied to a
dark,
chair,
at
water
night,
leaking
tied
down
to a
onto your head.
chair at gunpoint. So, and Marshall was the one holding the gun to my head while I was desperately trying to get my phone to charge. Also, I listened to the episodes using the OAC app, which whenever I click on an episode, you have to click on an episode before it lets you hit the play button. And when you click on an episode, the description pops up for the
I always
episode.
blur my eyes
So
out
I
when I
have
have to
to
open it.
avert my
Yes.
eyes very quickly, which I'm not always successful in doing. And I saw like a couple words that made it seem like it was going to be maybe like there was going to be like a tense moment or something like
Uh-huh.
that. And it was going to involve Connie. And I was
What
thinking
did
like, oh,
you
this must
what did you
be
pick
the
up on? I'm
album
curious.
episode. I was thinking like there's going to be one moment where it's just like, oh, conflict. And Connie's going to be in the episode.
Like emotional conflict, or like what was the vibe or the words that you picked up on? I'm curious.
The word like instantly like left my brain
Okay.
as I saw it because I like willed it to, but I was thinking like at one moment Connie's going to be in distress, which will be important to her, but I don't know if it will be like generally important to other people.
Okay, and you didn't
like
get
that.
the idea of whether
Which,
it was
like, might be a
distress,
problem
like
for her.
Connie's crying because her
No,
car
I
got
was just thinking, like,
rear-ended,
Connie's
or
gonna
like
be,
someone has a gun to her
like,
head.
upset at one point in this episode,
Okay.
which was the vibe I got. But then like the episode started with like the like conversations with Connie and stuff, music, and I was thinking like, well, of course she's gonna be upset. Like, it's a radio show. This is the album cover. And then yeah, so the episode starts and she's talking with Wooten, and I immediately thought like, oh, this episode's gonna be real boring. I know I said
You're
that
thinking
about
about
last
Wooten's Broken
episode.
Pencil show, right?
Yeah, I was thinking it was gonna be like Wooten's Broken Pencil show. I was thinking, I know I said the last episode was gonna be boring, and it wasn't, but I'm gonna be right about this one because it has very big like Wooten's Broken Pencil show vibes. If I'm lucky, I'll get more like superhero stuff from Wooten or something like that, like more Captain Absolutely or Drake the Cosmic Copper. And then Connie is doing like a Q&A with her fans and stuff, and they're asking for advice, and she's giving them advice, and the first person who wants advice is like this teenage girl who says like one of her friends is being sketchy or doing stuff she doesn't agree with or something. But the problem is she doesn't have many friends, so she doesn't really want to lose her friend. And Connie was like, well, if your ideologies and hers don't line up and stuff like that, you should probably drop her as a friend if like things are in a really rough place. And then this other guy who's on hold for like 20 minutes or something like that
Standard
gets
internet
on call,
commenter man.
and he was like, oh, I was gonna like leave. I was gonna have a question, but I don't want to ask my question anymore because from what I've heard of your advice, it's too like Christian-y and you're way too morally upright, and not everyone's advice is really going to work out.
To be fair,
for
that's
you
not what he
because
said.
they're
He just
not
said you have too many friends.
That's true, but that's kind of the vibe that Connie took away from it.
You're not relatable
And so
because everyone
then-
likes you too much and you have so many friends,
And
everyone else is lonely and sad.
Connie kind of snaps, which is unfortunate because
No.
she was doing fine, and it was like the first like radio show she'd done where she was just doing fine. And then she hits her breaking point, which I don't know why she was surprised. It was only a matter of time.
It's very like is the inspiration station when it's like, I need everyone to call in and tell me why I'm special.
She was like, it happened once and it worked. Why isn't it working again?
Because when Spencer first called and he was like, yeah, I mean, I'm in a really rough place right now, but I always thought you seemed approachable. And I thought what was going to happen was Connie was going to be like, thank you. See, someone agrees with me. Next caller. And be like the like boy who didn't go to church kind of thing where it's like, I,
Yeah.
like, you were asking for help, but all I heard was, like, you saying what I wanted to hear. I didn't even hear the rest of it, and now I'm going to move on and completely miss, like, the
See,
red flag there.
so like Devin said, Connie starts answering calls and is just like, "Who likes me?" And then this one guy called Spencer
Who
gets
likes
on the
me?
call.
And then it turns out there is someone there who does like Connie.
Who does like Connie? We'll get back to
I'm
that.
normal. He's
Um,
normal.
he's Riley playing Among Us. He's normal, and so then he gets on the call and he's like, "Yeah, I always thought you were really cool. We went to school together. I don't know if you remember me." And Connie doesn't really, but it's one of those things where it's just like, "Yeah, I remember you," and you do not.
Well, it's also
Which
because it's fake name.
honestly, I same. I do that too with people because I have an
Give them
awful
fake names and
memory.
then act angry when they don't remember
Not
you.
that. No, pretend to know people I don't because lots of people know who I am and I
How
have a
could you
very
not
bad
remember me,
memory.
Jessica?
And so Connie and this guy talk for a little bit and he's like, "I really need advice from you and I always thought you were really cool in high school and were a great role
Like,
model and
really,
stuff.
really cool. Like, really,
Like
really,
the
really,
best. Like
really cool.
you could fix me."
Do you
And
remember that time when you were hanging out posters and I tried to talk to you, but then I didn't, and I said that there was a pen mark on your cheek, but there wasn't, and Connie's like, "Well, that was like 12 years ago." So he's like, "Yeah, it was just like yesterday, right?"
it felt like a choose your own adventure game. It felt like Doki Doki, where Yuri's just like, "Do you love me?" And it's like, "Do you remember the mark on my cheek?" And it's just like, if I say yes and if I say no, it's just gonna end badly. It's gonna have the same bad outcome either way, where it's just gonna end oh so terribly. And I don't know about you, but I was just like, that sounds familiar. So then I paused the episode and I opened my iTunes and I went to Go Ye Therefore
Mm-hmm.
because I figured it would have been in that episode, if in any
I
episode.
didn't think
And
of.
I scrubbed around for
Uh-huh.
it and I could not find it.
Ah.
So I don't know if it's
What did you
actually
think
a
was
real
familiar?
thing.
The line about the pen on her cheek?
Yeah, I
I
was
don't.
just
I didn't
thinking
think that was.
like,
I don't remember
I was
that being a
thinking
thing
like,
before.
if that's happened, because I could see that being a thing that was in Connie's early
Yeah,
episodes,
like she thought
that
someone
it
was
would
gonna
be in
like
Go Ye
ask her about the
Therefore. So I
poster
did
and
check
then just
for
be
it.
like, "You have some pen on your face," and she was like, "Oh," and deflated by it. You mean? That does sound
Yeah,
like something that would happen in that episode.
yeah, exactly. So that's why I like
That would
paused
be.
and then I checked,
That would be really
which I was thinking
cool.
like would have been the best callback
That
ever.
would have been
Honestly,
amazing
I would
if
have been
that was
so
a thing that
impressed.
happened and you also had that thought and went back and found it. That would have been
Yes.
incredible. And I
I
thought
was
that's what
thinking
you were
like
gonna
if this isn't
say.
Go You Therefore, I'm gonna be so happy. I'm gonna be so impressed with whoever wrote this
When you
episode,
led into that
Marshall.
at the top of the episode, I thought you were gonna say that it was in the episode, and I was so excited to hear that, but it wasn't. But I'm glad you had the thought and look because I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I was thinking like I have to check because if this is, then I want to know.
And
Like
like you
it
said,
still might be in an episode, but I just
I
wasn't
don't
able to
remember
find
that
it.
ever being a line
I
before.
also did just because even though I like scrubbed through it pretty, I feel like pretty efficiently, even though I did do it fast, because I wanted to find out what was going to happen in this episode. I did just to double check. Also go on the wiki page for Go You Therefore and just like look over the summary to see if I
There's a
found
mention of
anything about
anything,
that there, and I didn't. So
Um,
I just wanted to be really sure.
it's what I love it when
So
things.
yeah,
It's like what the Blackguard novels do, where it's like, oh, well, it made sense beforehand, but then it's like we'll give it this extra story where you'll go back and like recontextualize this line, this throwaway line from the original version of the text,
it's
and
like
now it's
that
like,
thing people make jokes about when there started being all these like spin-off Star Wars movies where it's just like, yeah, we took this one line from this one Star Wars movie and we made another Star Wars movie about it. So then very quickly into the conversation with this guy, Connie gets called out of the room by Jason. And Jason's like, hey, I think this guy's pretty sketchy. And I also think he might be this wanted criminal who just escaped prison. And we need to keep you we need to like get you to keep him talking on the phone so
And I
that we
was
have
like,
enough time to try and figure out like
okay.
where he is, like suss out where he is right
Yeah.
now so we can find him. So the episode basically goes from like normal slice of life to like, holy crap, what is going on? This is now like a kind of suspense thriller crimey episode.
It feels more like, what's the episode, what's
surprising.
the movie that you made me watch on the airplane?
Red Eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt very Red Eye to me, too. Yeah. Where, go watch Red Eye if you haven't seen it yet. It's basically a movie where you're like, this is just very normal and casual and everything is chill. And then it's like,
And then
oh,
it isn't.
no, it's not. We are in a very high stakes situation. Go watch Red Eye. It's an amazing movie. I won't say anything more than that. It is one of my favorite movies. It's real good. Yeah, Connie goes back into the conversation, and every time she leaves, Wooten keeps on trying to, like, continue his show about, like, superheroes and stuff. And people are trying to ask Wooten for advice at one point, which makes Connie very upset because
Well, this is before Spencer called, right?
Yeah, this is before Spencer calls. They're like, I have an advice question, and Connie's like, oh, good. And they're like, not for you. I want to ask Wooten.
It was like an exact reflection of when Connie had Mitch on. Mm-hmm. And they were asking about like Argyle socks and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. And so Connie starts trying to like be comforting to Spencer while also trying to like figure out where he is and what he's doing.
Best part, Wooten does not know what's going on.
Yeah, and he's like reading all these comments on Connie's blog or website.
I think it was like Facebook Live kind of thing, like.
Yeah, and some of them are just very insulting internet comments where he starts reading and then he stops and he's like, I'm not gonna finish that one, which was pretty funny. One of them was also like shipping.
That was the same person. That's the thing. That was the shipping person, and then after everything happened, and then Wooten's like, I'm gonna read this comment from Jackson, who is the same person making the shippy comments, and that's when he was like, okay, I'm not gonna read any more comments from him.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, I feel like this is just mocking all the fans who me, like, lovingly mocking and poking fun at all the fans who have, like, who want Connie to be with someone, and then a guy comes in, and we're like, oh, ship them together, which I am one of those people when it comes to, my boy Mothman, specifically. I'm so bad with names right now. Jeff Lewis, thank you. My brain thinks Mothman before I think Jeff Lewis, and I don't know what that says about me.
Mothman.
And I think I'm just projecting onto Connie with the Mothman thing, but let's not get into that.
Anyway.
People who've never heard me talk about Mothman and Jeff Lewis are going to be so confused right now. I don't care. I probably didn't pick up on this soon enough, like the bad vibes from Spencer.
I also didn't until I was like, oh, I should have picked up on that earlier. But I'll get to that anyways.
I got like just kind of I
was like,
I don't know, I wanted Spencer to be okay.
Yeah.
I feel like the way he's written, like you want him to be
exactly,
happy,
yeah.
But not the way he's doing it. It was a very like you can fix me kind of relationship, which is the worst kind TM, basically.
And when it comes to like very common in those kinds of stalker obsessions, I think.
Yeah. And also, like, I feel like stories are so bad when it comes to this, like, relationships.
Well, it's a very, like, manic pixie dream girl kind of thing, right? That he was projecting onto Connie.
Yeah. And lots of Beauty and the Beast stories are really bad at this.
Yes.
Where it's just, like, this person can fix this other person. Yeah. And that's what drives me so crazy about, like, go watch Lindsay Ellis's videos on, like, this kind of thing. The reason why my favorite version of Beauty and the Beast is the animated Disney version is not because Belle and Beast don't have a I can fix him relationship. Belle has a I'm going to continue being who I am and showing like love and support to the people around me. And Beast has an arc where it's just like, I need to be a better person. Belle isn't making me a better person. I'm choosing to make myself a better person, which is the right way to go about a story and a relationship between two characters where one of them needs to improve. I don't like fixing narratives. I don't, because you see it all the time with like characters who are
me at Frozen when they sing a bit of a fixer-upper, and I was like, this is how you build unhealthy codependency in your relationships.
But like relationships and stories, and Jenny Nicholson talks about this a little bit in her new
I've only just started
video, which I won't get too heavy into. I feel like this is just a general thing people say about stories a lot, so it's not really a spoiler.
Yeah.
But in lots of stories where there's like a love interest who is kind of antagonistic, and the main character's like his only weakness or something like that. Like he only shows love and support towards this one character, but like hates everyone else. I despise that
the
so
thing
much
that's like,
because
hey,
like
if someone is like, oh, I like them because they're mean to everyone else except for me, and it's like, it sounds like they're a bad person.
That's not good. They're just straight up a bad person. And like there's this book series I really, really loved, and it had 3 books which were great, and there was a character that was like that, and you could tell they were like becoming a better person at the end. And then there were 3 books years later that were added to make the series a little bit longer, and then it focused more on this character growing as a person and becoming better, like through his relationships with everyone else in the book, because he already had a good relationship with the love interest. And then the love interest is taken away in the last book by the villains, and then the main character becomes the love interest, like the guy love interest, and he just completely shuts down for the entire book and just goes back to hating everyone. And it felt like the first 3 books were just really building up like all of his friendships with everyone else. So it was like, oh, it doesn't matter if she's taken away because he's become a better person without her, and he's going to be able to like deal with all this. And then he hates everyone for the last book, and then he's only nice when she comes back, and even then he's like even worse somehow to everyone else. And I was so upset, and it was one of my favorite book series ever, and I just despised the last book, and it's so disappointing to me. Like,
so back to the plot of the episode.
Just writing tropes that people need to work on. Fortunately, that doesn't happen in the video that Jenny talks about. She does talk about that, but she's like, they avoided this trope, so I was happy about that. But it made me go in that tangent I just went in my head when I watched the Jenny video. But anyway, this episode...
There's specifically 2 phases to what Jason needs, because at first he's like, based on the information we've got, I think it's possible that he's this person, but we don't know for sure, so we need you to kind of get him talking about more personal information so we can determine if it's probable that he is actually this escaped convict.
Sorry, you keep talking.
Okay, and Connie does that, and he's like, okay, now we need you to figure out, like, where he is, or even, like, just keep him talking, and we'll figure out the rest. Don't try and steer the conversation so it doesn't become too suspicious. So we're like, he's outside, and then he's inside somewhere, and then he's shaving, and we're, like, going, and it becomes very clear after a point that, like, oh, he is a stalker, he is obsessed with Connie.
There's
and then we get
this
the classic
line early on in...
We get the classic, like, foreshadowing tie back around where they tell you without telling you that makes your stomach drop.
So Connie's very tired at the beginning of the episode. I think she tells this to Wooten. That she barely got any sleep last night because Jillian wanted to... lots of mentions of Jillian in this episode, which is very good. Jillian wanted her to install this really weird smoke detector, which talks, and it basically, like, never shuts up.
Yeah.
And
she was like, it says this, like, please proceed to the nearest exit, or something like that. So this, like, long, specific phrase.
And they say it, like, very early at the start of the episode, enough so that you pretty much forget about it. And then there's this one bit where...
Classic Chekhov's fire alarm.
Mm-hmm. And then there's this one bit where Spencer's kind of talking weirdly, and Connie's like, you good? And he's like, oh yeah, I'm just shaving. And then in the background, you hear like please proceed to the nearest fire exit. And
Just
then
for a
I
second.
totally forgot
As soon as I heard it, and I
about
was
the
like,
thing.
the
And
call's
then Connie
coming
just
from
kind of
inside
stops.
the house. The call's
And
coming
then
from
she's just
inside the
like,
house.
I need to leave. Wooten, you take over. I'll be right back. And then she runs into the other room. And I was like, okay, something's going on, but I don't
can't believe
remember
as
what.
soon as I heard that, I just got
And
chills. I
then
was like,
and then Connie runs up to Jason. She's freaking out. And she's like, he is in my house. And I was just like so deeply unsettled. I don't know about you.
I'm getting chills right now just thinking about it. It's so good
same.
because
I don't know about you, but I have like this huge fear of home invasion stories. Like they freak me out like really badly. And we haven't really had a home invasion thing like this in Odyssey.
I thought you were going to say in real life.
Before.
I thought you were saying we haven't had a home invasion.
No, no. I mean, like, we haven't had, like, a home invasion narrative really in Odyssey.
No, I mean, we had Hold Up, but that's at Wit's End, which is like a home. And it used to be a home, but...
Well, that doesn't count.
Jason lived there after that.
Connie wasn't in the house. But the thing is, like, it was already set up early in the episode, too, that Jules and Jillian were out at the mall. And I was thinking, like, they could be back any minute. And there's this crazy guy who probably has a gun inside their house. And what if they get hurt? And just the invasion of privacy and stuff. Like, it doesn't matter that Connie's not there. The fact that he, like, found her house and he broke into her house unless her freaking door was unlocked.
Like, I mean, I guess it is the same house where she used to live in high school. Because I was like, I guess it's justified that at least, like, he didn't manage to figure out, like, where does Connie live now? I mean, there's already the level of, like, he knew where she lived in high school, even though she barely knew him, and then he remembered all this time. But if she was living in a different house now, then...
It's the fact that he, like, found out where she was living in high school, probably by watching her back in high school.
With the telescope from Astronomy Club.
Oh...
You wouldn't be able to use a telescope like that, and it would be impractical, but I just thought it was a funny connection.
Oh, I don't like that. But that's so deeply disturbing.
It is extremely...
Honestly.
I mean, it is one of the most...
I hate it.
You really don't see it coming until, like it takes a while, like you said, for you to pick it up in the episode, and by the end, once you realize he's in her house, it's like one of the most disturbing narratives that this show has ever done. I mean, obviously...
I know. I wasn't sure if I was just, like, over-exaggerating, but like I said, I listened to this episode while I was sleeping.
In the Clock Tower episode, that was, like... They mentioned, like, oh, he was stalking her and stuff, but it's, like, it's not really gone into deeply. And this is the only other time where we've really addressed, like, stalking as a thing on the show.
And, like, I was sitting in the dark, just laying downstairs all by myself, and I was thinking, like, okay, my door's locked. I'm good. And I was just laying there, just, like, in silence for, like, a long amount of time, just staring at the ceiling. And I remember saying to myself, like, this episode left me, like, I haven't been this creeped out by an Odyssey episode ever since, like, Novacom or The Mysterious Stranger are the only other two episodes.
Yeah,
that have,
I was like, I know it's lacking the physical element
out.
Of, like, there's no one else in the house with him. It's not like Connie's broadcasting from her house because of COVID, and then she realizes, like, oh, the call's coming from inside the house. She is at wit's end. But even still, just the fact that, like, he's in your house right now and you know it and he doesn't yet is just like, and then, so... The sirens...
I feel like it's going to take me a while before I can honestly listen to this episode again.
The sirens arrive, and he realized what happens, and he was like, Connie, why? And Wooten's like, I don't know what's going on.
You betrayed me. If you spent more time with me, then my life wouldn't be bad. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot stand this guy.
And then in the end, he's like, yeah, I guess if you had thought about helping me, then you wouldn't have been the person that made me become obsessed with you in an unhealthy and illegal way. So thank you for everything. I'm going to go outside and surrender now. Goodbye. And Wooten is like...
And it was like Emily when she left the escape room, where it was just like Connie was very much not okay at the end of this episode. And I'm really glad because... That's something you don't just brush off.
Yeah. Um,
Like, oh
yeah,
man.
that was a fairly traumatic experience. Um,
If I was her, I would not want to stay in the house for like the
that's
rest of the
that's what
day.
I
I
was
would
gonna
want to
say.
stay at someone else's
I wouldn't
house.
want
I
to.
would ask to stay with Eugene and Katrina and Buck,
Yeah. Okay. So
or Penny and Wooten.
so that's basically the end of the episode. They ended out being like, well, sometimes you aren't. One of those episodes that really didn't feel like it matched the body of the episode, where it's like,
I know. And then there was also one line that I really just like, where he said like, I really like this painting or something like that, and Connie was like, thanks, Penny painted that for me, and I was just not okay listening to this.
um,
This episode got so heavy because like lots of the time in fictional shows, especially Odyssey, it's just like when they have a conflict, it's like a really outlandish conflict where it's just
yeah,
like this is never something I'll have to deal
uh huh.
with. But then you have something that's just like as real and freaky as like home invasion
Something
and
that
stalking and
something that
stuff
is
like
both
that.
scary enough to be scary, but realistic enough to be plausible. And you
And
hit in
also
that
just
circle in the
like
middle, and it's like, oh, I don't like that.
the and also just being like a woman and listening to
Yeah,
it and hearing it happen to another woman just left me like so shook, and I was just not okay after I listened to this
yes.
episode
By
at
default,
all.
your visceral reaction to the episode is going to go like beyond and above what I can
Yeah,
empathize
I
with.
just oh my gosh, I was just sitting in the dark for a while after this one, just in silence, just being like, what did I just listen to? I was so completely shook by this episode.
Yeah, I
And then
wasn't
I was like,
expecting it. Like, not just in
who
terms
wrote
of the
this?
plot up to that point, but in terms of like that the show did that. Um,
I'm gonna see what else Marshall's written.
well, we talked about last time. We said that you were saying that Marshall is your writer for Jay and for
Wait, that was Marshall?
yeah.
I thought that was someone else.
Nope. Was your writer
Okay.
for your favorite characters?
I'm gonna
I think. Did you say Marshall also wrote a lot of the Rydell episodes? I don't remember. And a lot of Novacom
um
stuff.
he wrote a lot of the Bridget and Wyatt
Yes, that was the other
stuff.
thing. Was Perkins,
Yeah,
Perkins, and Jay.
he worked on a lot of Novacom stuff, so he just has all these episodes that just like leave me
Yeah.
shook. Like,
Um,
um, he, I'm just looking at some other
I should
stuff.
watch Red Eye with Alex if they haven't seen it.
Red Eye's so good. I watched it with Amanda right after I moved to Alberta.
Okay, so
Red Eye is like honestly the best like narrative I can compare to this one. That's a good comparison that you made.
yeah, thank you. And not even when I said it, I wasn't intending it for it to be as much of an analog as it was when I said it. But
Yeah, he's not the J. He's not the J one.
who are you talking about then?
He's
Were you talking
the
about?
one who wrote for Bridget and Wyatt.
Well, yeah, but who's the person? Who is the other main writer you were talking about who'd written so many like on Becoming Jay and 30 J's House
Someone
and Number and stuff?
else. It might be Dave Arnold.
I don't think it was Dave, but I could be wrong. Anyways,
No. Yeah, it was Dave Arnold.
okay. Anyways, so my thoughts from the beginning of the episode, which I guess basically started when Spencer was coming. I didn't have a whole lot that I wrote down for this episode because one where it's just like you're in it, we're going through it. Spencer was like, yeah, I mean, I thought it was weird, how all your best friends were old men, and I was like, correct.
Oh, yeah, Marshall is. I talked about two people having J writing privileges, and Marshall was one of them.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. So, yeah, Spencer was like, yeah, I was your friend in high school, but you didn't really notice me. And like I said, at first I thought it was going to be this thing about how Connie is becoming too prideful about the comment and wanting responses from people that are what she wants to hear, that
Same.
it's blinding her to hearing what she needs to be hearing from and actually helping people in need when they need it, which is kind of almost what was happening. And it's something that we've talked about before. Like I said, classic, like The Boy Who Didn't Go to Church, where they're like, oh, we were talking to this guy on the bench every day and didn't realize that because, we weren't listening to what he was actually saying. So then Jason was like, hey, this guy's an escaped convict. I was like, this episode just got suddenly interesting. And at first I was like, I really hope, like, I know it seems very unlikely, but just on an interesting plot level, I hope this episode ends with Connie deciding like, oh, what this guy needs is not to go back to jail, but to like fix these other things in his life. And she's going to be like, they're after you, run, and like tell him to like escape before Jason can like
I did think about something like
before
that too.
Jason can like, cut the live broadcast or something, which is funny then, because at the end he's like, did you even have a thought about warning me and letting me get away? And she was like, not for a moment. And I was like, guilty as charged.
Yeah, I thought like maybe she would talk him through a lot of his problems or something like that.
Yeah.
And then by the end of it, they would be like, all right, you've served enough time. We can see that you want to like improve. Yeah. That is absolutely not what happened.
And then I was like, wow, he really remembers Connie a lot. And then it's like, he really remembers Connie a lot. Okay,
he really remembers Connie, never stops thinking about Connie.
And there's like,
probably broke out of jail so he could talk to her.
My bad, kind of misread this situation first, and I'm glad that you said the same thing. I was like, I felt bad. I was like, I clearly wasn't paying enough attention to realize he was a stalker.
There were certain moments where I was just kind of like...
I was giving it the benefit of the doubt at first.
A little bit like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this character. Yeah. I was never inherently positive on him for like the whole time he showed up, and my opinion just grew more and more negative as the episode progressed.
I did think it was very funny at first when Jason said what was going...
I did get some kind of hindsight vibes from him,
definitely.
Though,
but yeah, it makes me feel better that you were feeling the same way. It wasn't immediately like as red flag as I was like, oh, maybe I just missed it all.
Yeah. Same. I like to think I'm getting good at figuring out when I should be unsettled by characters who are gonna be bad. But I also think that's just on good writing.
I thought it was very funny after Jason was like, hey, I think this guy's from like this prison break in Chicago. And I was like, me, when I escaped from jail, and the first thing I do was call Candid Conversations with Connie. Which was funnier before I found out he was stalking her. I really like the fact that Wooten didn't know what was going on, both from a plot level and the situation, but also just because I thought it was really funny that like as these things are going on and Wooten is just completely clueless to it, and then like the police cars show up and Wooten's like, wait, what? And then after the broadcast ends, Wooten's like putting the pieces together, and he was like, okay, wow, that was actually really creepy. And I was like, that was like real. Like he reached the end and Wooten's like, okay, what?
Yeah, that's why I was so I guess Wooten is kind of a reflection of the audience listening to the show.
Yeah.
Who, not like us, the audience, like in-universe audience, who he's reading the chat of, which is, I guess it's so much like Red Eye. I keep on thinking about this now.
Be careful, because you're going to spoil the movie for anyone listening to our comparisons.
Yeah, okay. If you're going to go watch Red Eye, watch it now, because we're going to talk about some spoilers. I'm not going to go over the plot of Red Eye, basically. It's like this terrorist guy who's going to assassinate all these people on this plane, and the woman on the plane has the option to kind of stop him, but he's also at certain points like kind of making it look like to everyone else on the plane like they're in a relationship.
Well, the movie and the trailer, the thing is, like, the trailer and the beginning of the movie are set up to make it look like it's going to be a rom-com.
They make it look like it's a rom-com, and then it turns out to be like a thriller where she's fighting for her life against this guy, and it's really interesting.
So yeah, I do agree. Like Wooten reading the comments, I thought it was like, it's very much like, you know, the fact that everyone's like, oh, we're shipping them because they knew each other before. Yeah, and like everyone else on the plane in Red Eye, and like the old lady on the plane who's just like, oh, you're such a sweet couple and stuff like that. And when they see them like come out of the bathroom together, and everyone's like, oh, they were in the bathroom together. But if you're the audience, you were watching him like almost murder her in the bathroom and stuff like that, and her try to warn everyone by writing a message on the mirror, and you're like terrified. And he's just playing it off as like, aha, yep, we're definitely a couple. And it leaves a
awful taste in your
yeah,
mouth and you're so
and
unsettled, and just Wooten being like, ooh, all these shippy comments, and I was just like, I am so
yeah,
uncomfortable right
that
now.
all of
And
that,
that
and
was
then the
even,
second it ends, and then Wooten looks and he sees the same commenter and he reads the same kind of thing,
yeah,
and then all of a sudden he's like, I'm not going to read any more comments from this person, and that was so great in terms of suddenly that shift of
I didn't
perspective and
even
like
put that together that it
the
was,
same
I thought it
name.
was
Yeah,
like
no.
the commenter who was just saying like this show sucks and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
no, I
I
recognized it was
didn't
the same
realize it
name, and
was
I
the
was like,
shipping
oh,
commenter. I kind of want to re-listen to this episode just for like
picking
the
up on the
Wooten
things. Yeah.
stuff now,
Well, I'm sure there's a
because
lot to
Wooten's
be
kind of the
picked up on.
audience surrogate on two levels. He like changes from being the in-show audience surrogate to the out-of-show audience surrogate by the end of the episode,
Yeah.
which is really interesting. Wooten and Connie's friendship, that's something we haven't really touched on in a little bit.
It's been a
Ever
while, yeah.
since
We've talked about it a lot in the context of Plan B before.
Yeah, we talked about in Plan B, and then also how she kind of wingmanned for Wooten and stuff with Penny. And then there's like another episode where they were just like leaning on each other a lot, but I can't remember what it was. And then also just all the wedding planning stuff, and them faking like being married to like sell promotional stuff.
Ah, yes. I thought you were talking about
Mitch.
Wooten's wedding, like Connie and Eugene to get the ring back.
Yeah,
but something.
I mean
something
that
new.
too. The fact that she planned their wedding and helped him a lot, but they have such a good relationship. I feel like it's something we can talk about now because it's been such a while since we talked about it. But they have like a really, really wholesome friendship, and just him like supporting her at the end of the episode, which I can't talk about as much as I'd like to because I was so shook by everything else. I wasn't really paying as much attention because I was probably like kind of spiraling a little bit after, like, from the moment where you realize he's in her house. I was just like kind of like,
it's funny because
freaking out until the episode.
I keep
was
calling
done.
him Spencer because that's what the fake name he went by, so that's what we heard him the most as.
What was his name?
It was something. It was like Thomas Bart something.
Okay.
What I was going to say, when he first talked about, like, yeah, I just kept making these wrong choices, and then he starts talking about, like, I stole from this vending machine even though I knew it was wrong, and I was like, please don't tell me they're going to, like, make this huge moral thing where it's, like, but it's in the case of, like, over-exaggerating, like, these really petty things, because all I could think of was, like, two roads, where it's like, I stole that chocolate bar from the vending machine, and that's what led me to becoming, like, the head of the Republican Party kind of thing, you know?
Which one's Two Roads again?
It's where it's the kids' radio episode, and it's like the good guy and the bad guy, and he's like, you shouldn't steal the chocolate bar from the candy machine, and then he does, and then one of them becomes like the president, and the other becomes like a mobster and stuff, and then they die, and they both go to hell.
Oh, right, yeah. I barely remember that episode.
It's album 34.
It's been a very long time since I heard it. Well, it's a half episode.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I felt like it was going to go very hindsight-y. And there is that thing with like lots of characters which I feel like I hear more and more often now because I'm into lots of series that have many morally gray characters who have trauma but still lash out at other people. So you have fans do like analysis stuff, and it's just like, it doesn't matter that this character is traumatized if they like weaponize that trauma
Cool
against
motive,
others
still murder.
and use it to like, yeah, exactly, like use it to justify their stuff. Like, you can, it's that thing that you sometimes hear pastors say where they're doing a sermon and it's like, you can ask forgiveness and God will forgive you, but sometimes you still have to like depending on what you've done,
pay consequences.
You still have to deal with consequences, and like you have to accept the fact that you do have consequences for your actions. And then you come across characters who like not only don't want to accept the consequences for their actions, use bad stuff that's happened to them to argue the fact that like consequences shouldn't matter to them because they just go out and hurt more people. And then if you've if you've ever talked to like a therapist or anything like that, one of the first things like a therapist tells you is like, don't use like your hurt to justify hurting others and stuff. Which is why like I love it when writers talk about that kind of stuff, who write characters that do that kind of thing, and then they in turn don't justify that character's actions. They have other characters go up against them and then call them out for like all of their nonsense. Which like that's what Spencer's doing in this episode. He's basically blaming like everything on Connie more or less for like not fixing him and saving him. And
the only thing left I wanted to talk about really was the theme at the end. It's one of those themes, and it's been brought up before, and I feel like it's more frequently a theme in other things outside of this show that are like of a very like explicitly Christian nature. The theme of like, you need to do the right thing, and sometimes that means that like you'll lose friends and people will hate you, but that's okay because you need to keep doing the right thing. And it's like, I mean, technically, yes, that is correct, but it's one of these themes where when you give it without any other context to it than that, it is very easily co-opted by people as a shield for when they do terrible things, and then they'd say like, oh, you know, it's part of my faith and I'm just being persecuted. Like people who are like, oh, well, I'm going to enact policies that are like misogynistic and racist and ableist and homophobic and transphobic, and then they're like, I'm losing friends, my family's disowning me, I'm losing all my followers, cancel culture, it's because of my commitment to Jesus, this is persecution. It's like, no, this is happening because you're a bad person, and you just slap a persecution complex on it. So I do agree with what was being said about Connie there, but I do get annoyed sometimes when we like see this theme without a broader context, because I think people will take it, I've seen before, a lot, take this general theme and be like, oh, that means that if I do something that I think is right and people tell me that I'm wrong, then like, no, it's the birds who are wrong. You know?
the bourgeoisie.
No, the Simpsons meme.
Oh.
Where he's like,
Okay.
The guy where he's like, not old man yells at clouds, but
they're like, darn you birds, or
yeah, whether
no,
he's
that's
like
clouds.
outside in a suit and there's a branch above him. It was like, am I like wrong about XYZ? No, it's the blank that is wrong. It's like, well, clearly, no matter what I do, if someone dislikes it, then automatically it means that they're wrong and they hate me because, you know, I'm carrying my cross, and not, maybe I should self-examine and see if I'm doing the thing that's wrong. And people kind of don't self-reflect on their actions, because if you get this idea drilled enough into your head that like, if someone dislikes you or disagrees with what you're doing, it's because, you know, you're being persecuted for your faith kind of idea. So that's why I think that this kind of lesson is an important one to be very self-reflective about when it comes up. So it's not that it's inherently bad.
Connie is a pretty self-reflective character, though.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying for the audience, when they receive this lesson, I think that if you just give it by itself and people absorb that without like other things around it that contextualize it, it can become something dangerous because people can use it to shield themselves from self-reflection.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm giving this episode 5 out of 5 because it was... it was really good. This was the core of this album. These are the middle episodes. Stellar.
Yeah, I'm gonna quickly just pop open iTunes, look at what the last couple albums have been like, because this album
the last album was excellent because it had the Rydell Revelations and then the Jewel
I
stuff.
opened the podcast. I don't like that this is multiple apps now.
Yeah, that's why I haven't updated my computer in like a year and a half.
Okay. Yeah, we had the Rydell Revelations.
California
we
Dreams
had,
and First Song.
Jillian. Nope, wrong album. Let me close that. Maury with his little cardboard cutout face mask putting over his face. Okay, we had Forest Song and California Dreams.
Yeah.
I feel like I shouldn't really count that one because it's kind of a sub-normal episode. I'm going to go to the one before it. So we have like Good Job, Playing Favorites, Why Surprise, Breaking News, Always Home, Further from the Truth. All of those were like, lots of the time the albums have the problem where it's just like the first one and the last one are really good, or like the first one, either the first or last, and then a middle one, and then there's lots of like substandard episodes.
Or standard
episodes. Not jinxing it. Yeah.
Just mediocre. It could
just like
equally as well be an
amazing.
AIOC episode, or maybe we'll sneak in a little bit of character development for one of our main arcs, but nothing too, earth-shattering.
Nothing that would like surprise the two of us or like impress us or anything. And so far, out of the 4 episodes we've had this season, each one has left us kind of shook. The second one, in a weird way.
Yeah, the second one not necessarily in a way that
it still had a shock
complimentary, but
about it. The second episode, don't get me wrong, not good, but it still did have a shock element.
Like sticking your finger in an open light fixture.
Like sticking a fork in a toaster.
Like the painting that Penny made.
This album's been really good so far. Hopefully not ruining it for the next couple episodes. But I accidentally did see a couple of words of the description for the album.
All I saw was Connie's car getting stolen, so I haven't seen anything else.
So
I'm free and clear.
I found out
Don't.
Certain characters they're going to be in one episode before the album ends.
Okay.
So I won't say who, but yeah. I feel like... Oh, I really hope I'm not wrecking it by saying this. I feel like the rest of the album is going to be good.
Okay, I look forward to it. So, what are we doing next time, Victoria? Did you give your rating for this episode?
No, I didn't. You're right. I feel like I really need to listen to this one again. Because I was just so shocked by... I was kind of underwhelmed by the first, 7-ish minutes. Mm-hmm. And then I was just reeling for the rest of the episode. So I feel like I didn't take it in properly. I'm gonna give it a 4.5, which if I heard it a second time would probably be a 5. So let's just go with a 5. I guess.
Yeah, I didn't think about the fact that, because I don't like the way the theming was done. Not just because
kind of weird.
Not just because of what I said, but I don't feel like it matches the body of the episode very well. So I'm going to give it a 4.9. I'm just going to knock off a 0.1 for that.
I feel like this episode did it on purpose, though, in some ways, where it just kind of disguised itself as a very mediocre episode, and then it turned out not to be. It's like how you said the last episode had, 2 very big turning points where you think it's a normal episode, and then it surprises you. The first time in the last episode is when Buck does end up having the car, and in this one it's just when you find out Spencer, whatever his name is a criminal. Yeah. And then the second turning point in the other one was no, Buck actually did steal the car.
Well, for me, the first turning point in the first one, the first surprise or red herring at least that I was saying, was the fact that it wasn't just Connie with her cold medicine, because was the obvious red herring in the beginning.
Well, I mean full on turning points.
Okay. In a more of a writing structure, you mean?
Yeah. And then the second one is Buck did steal the car, he was going to run away. Yeah. And in this one it was just
he's in your house.
This guy is in your house. The
call's coming from inside the house.
Where it's just you can break these episodes into 3 chunks where it's just the suspense just racking on and it's really good.
Okay.
So I'm going to give it a 4.8.
What are we talking about next time? Because the last episode of Album 70 is not out yet as of this recording.
No, so we're going to talk about the next 2 OAC episodes that we haven't talked about yet.
Yes.
Which I don't know what they're called.
Which are Badges of Honor and A Simple Reminder.
Yes, because we're still on last year's episodes, which isn't really bad because we're in January, so...
Yeah. We've been in a worse place before. Not as bad as it could be.
We're basically caught up with we are caught up with the albums.
Well, the album, yeah.
Yeah, which we usually aren't, so.
So that's what we're doing next time. Until then, thank you for joining us on our side of YouTube. I've been Dem Francis, also known as Dr. Blackard.
And I'm still shook.
And this has been the Adventures in Odyssey Oddcast.